he's just come out with the plan. He says he's got the money, but it's something which is ostensibly, as you were saying, meant to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the American Declaration of Independence. But really, it's about him. I mean, he'll say it's about him. And it's of a piece with all these grandiose kind of like the golding of the White House, doing all, and there's kind of like portraits of him that adorn everywhere that he goes about. It's all about him. But whether it actually happens, but like Donald Trump's plans for the future don't tend to be followed through. There are a lot of hurdles to be got over, but certainly he wants to see it, I would imagine, as a symbol of his triumph. It's meant to commemorate his great achievements as he would see them. But these things don't usually end that well. The original Arc de Triomphe, right, was commissioned when Napoleon was at his height. He'd just won the Battle of Austerlitz. Europe was at his feet. And the original Arc de Triomphe was meant to commemorate that greatness. But by the time it actually came up, he was dead. He'd been defeated. France was hardly the glorious nation that it had once been. And I don't know about you, but I used to be obsessed with the Second World War when I was growing up. And there's one photograph of the Arc de Triomphe that I remember very clearly, and it's of German troops.
Exactly.
Victorious German troops. So you have to be, whatever your intentions are to start with, you can't control what's going to happen, and you might look a complete fool as a consequence.
Talking of German troops, when I did my Berlin documentary for the BBC many years ago, one of the things we looked into was a massive slab of concrete in one part of Berlin that's now residential, which Albert Speer had sunk into the ground, Hitler's architect and munitions minister, to see just how clammy and soft the soil of Berlin was and whether it could sustain the establishment, the building of a massive triumphal arch, a sort of Arc de Triomphe times 10, rather like Trump's, in Berlin. And of course, those plans for the arch, and I'm not making any comparisons here but with Trump and Hitler, but those plans for the arch were somewhat flummoxed by total devastating defeat in World War II. But again, Hitler was trying to do something rather similar.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I'm not drawing any parallels between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler, but it is interesting that Hitler had these grandiose architectural designs. In fact, he wanted to recreate and rebuild the city of Linz into the greatest city in Europe that everybody would come and admire, and they would admire him and the
Linz in Austria, where he was born, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And in the end, he was just left with a model which he would go down obsessively and look at as he could hear Russian artillery shelling the bunker. So, yeah, they all have these dreams, and they are of a piece. Authoritarian leaders of different sorts love to leave an imprint on the future, but they very rarely get the kind of imprint that they want.
So your message to any wannabe dictator or any very powerful president, again, we're not naming any names, be careful what you plan in terms of monuments and arches and anything, in concrete or bronze or granite that celebrates your victory.
Absolutely. And there's a wonderful, very short Shelley poem that anyone listening to this can get and have a look at, Ozymandias, where the person who is sort of recounting the tale is looking at this statue that a pharaoh left. And it was huge. It was huge when it was originally built. But when this person in the poem comes across it, there's just two trunkless legs almost hidden in the sand. And this great pharaoh and the motto at the base of this statue in the poem declares himself to be King of Kings and is, demanding of the person who's looking at it in their own imagination, look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair. Yeah. And all is left is a ruin.
Right, well, that's incredibly relevant, isn't it, these days, on so many different levels. I mean, I lived in Washington for a long time, and it actually always struck me that the monuments to different conflicts in Washington really captured the way those conflicts ended. So the Korean War, which ended with an armistice, has literally a platoon of soldiers frozen in time, marching into battle because the conflict was frozen. The monument to the First World War, where America barely took any part, is a sort of rather small, diminished golden flame, the flame of liberty, I guess. The monument to the Second World War, which is America's finest moment that cemented the Pax Americana, it looks a little bit like Albert Speer redesigning Stonehenge. I mean, it's very square-jawed, it's very triumphalist.
Yeah.
And I find that absolutely fascinating.
But I think there is an exception to the rule that I've been kind of establishing, and that's in Washington, the Lincoln Memorial. I think the Lincoln Memorial, which wasn't, of course, commissioned by Lincoln, he'd been assassinated. I think that is a genuine place where Americans do gather for various purposes to celebrate their national identity and to also pay homage to Lincoln's effective sacrifice, because he really had an achievement. He remade the American nation. He did end slavery. He did real things, and like I say, he didn't commission it. He's not a Donald Trump. He was dead and buried before people wanted to commemorate his achievements.
I'm sure that I wouldn't be surprised that Donald Trump, dreamt of. Well, he has been open about, maybe joking, maybe not, about having his face on Mount Rushmore. Maybe he dreams of sitting next to, Abraham Lincoln. Maybe a slightly bigger version of Trump in the memorial itself. The other memorial in Washington that I found fascinating was the one to the Vietnam War, which of course was a terrible war that ended very badly for America, and that is all about the names of the fallen American soldiers. It's not about any leader. It's not about Nixon or Kennedy, who started it, or LBJ, who then brought it to a pretty disastrous conclusion. It's about the people who died unnecessarily in the pursuit of it.
Yes, and who knows, if Trump does have his way and this arch is created, maybe Americans in the future will look upon it as a kind of anti-Trump commemoration, and to commemorate all the people whose lives have been affected, but not necessarily in a very positive way, by the presidency of Donald Trump.
Well, let's see. I mean, the fate of that monument will tell us about the fate of the Republic itself. Professor Stephen Fielding, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme.